I'm going to call this meeting to order. My name is Peter Hoffman, Chair of the Economic Development Committee. This is a remotely conducted open meeting. As a preliminary matter, this meeting may be audio or video recorded. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Paul Anderson.
Here.
Jason Rowell.
Here.
Jeff Green.
Here.
And I'm Peter Hoffman. With a quorum of the committee present, I call this meeting to order at 11 a.m. Monday, April 25th, 2022. So that said, allow me to give a little bit of background, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Carolyn. Carolyn's in the background as well. Say hi.
Hi.
So Carolyn approached me. First of all, thank you for allowing this meeting, all of you, Paul, Jeff, and Jason. Carolyn approached me for support that she'll talk about for the Mount Pisgah land acquisition, the Horseshoe Pond acquisition. And while I may or may not support it, it's not my call to speak for the EDC, and that's why I called the meeting. Carolyn can clarify this, but we are going to decide, or attempt to decide, whether we want to support an application to the state for grant money, not so much if we're supporting the acquisition of the Horseshoe Pond property. Carolyn can clarify that. By the time we're done chatting, we'll make a motion to vote on whether or not to support this application to the state. And if the answer is yes, I'll draft a letter to the state, turn it over to Carolyn and the Conservation Commission, and they'll take it from there. So that said, Carolyn, the floor is yours. Correct me if I misspoke.
No, that's all correct. Oh, so we are applying for two grants, both of which are reimbursement grants. One is the one that is asking for letters of support is the MVP grant, which is the state has a lot of money to give to communities for climate change vulnerability. And this project certainly qualifies. It's considered important for mitigating flood and wind damage and just habitat resilience in general, all of which are designated important climate change mitigation for communities. So one of the things that, the grant application is broken down into sections, and each section has a point value. One of the sections is letters from the community or community members or organizations within the community. They're looking for 3 letters, and I was hoping that the Economic Development Committee would see the importance of adding to the recreation area that we already have, and how especially the Mount Pisgah area brings lots of people to town who then hopefully stop at the general store or other places in town to spend their dollars. So I asked Peter if you guys would write a letter of support for this project.
So just to clarify, it's a letter supporting the Conservation Committee and the town of Berlin in its application for grant monies, right?
I mean, so the letter goes as it gets submitted as part of the grant application. But I guess the letter would we would be looking for the letter to support the project.
So support the acquisition and the grant application.
Correct.
Okay. So I guess that hopefully clarifies it for the 4 of us. Paul, Jeff, Jason?
I have remodeling going on, so I have to be very careful when I speak. Right. And it's gonna go loud right now, so somebody else go.
Okay. Jeff, Jason?
How long have we been working on this project to acquire this land?
The Conservation Commission has been writing letters to the property owner for over 10 years.
And the
Um,
property owners just finally decided to sell. So we're trying to, go ahead.
Yeah, originally the gentleman that bought the land, the property owners live in Carlisle and they had bought the land to develop. He then held on to it and passed away, and then his wife wasn't sure if she wanted to do anything, and she's now elderly, and now the kids really want to see it conserved. And so they are the ones who have agreed to the sale. So we had a handshake deal right before COVID. We met with the select board in February of 2020 to talk about different possible ways to fund it. Then the coronavirus hit and the town said, we're not spending any money, which understandably. And then about a year, so sometime in 2021, we got in touch with the property owners again and said, you know, we're still interested. We're still trying to figure out funding. And they said, well, you know, because on the news, everybody was hearing everyone's moving to the country. So they thought that the property might be worth more than we had agreed to. And then we let a couple more months go by and got in touch with them again, and they had a change of heart and decided that they really wanted to see it conserved. And they did bump up their asking price a little bit more, but it was still within reason. So
It went from 1.1 to 1.25, do I remember that right?
Yep.
So out of the 1.25 million, some of it's coming from CPA money. And some
Most
of
of
it's
it's coming from CPA.
And
Which will get refunded if we buy it, right? I mean, 75% of that gets refunded to the town, to CPA through grants.
If this grant is successful.
Right, exactly. Or
A reimbursement grant is not a guarantee, but you know, that's why I'm here today asking you guys for the support to help increase our odds of getting this grant.
But if Peter were willing to give $1 million to SVT to purchase this property, then all this money comes back to the town. I mean, if they are able to raise those level of funds as well, as I understand it, specifically for the purchase.
So Sudbury Valley Trustees has a trust fund,
Correct.
obviously, and they are purchasing the property for us.
Correct.
Because we can, normally what happens, so a reimbursement grant, we can't get a reimbursement grant if we own the property. So normally we enter into an agreement with the property owner where we've got 6 or 9 months to apply for these grants.
Right.
The property owner was not willing to wait, or not willing, really just not willing to work with the town. They didn't want any contingencies about town meeting. They didn't want, they just wanted a clean sale. So Sudbury Valley Trustees has stepped in and said, fine, we'll enter into the agreement and then we'll sell it to you after we own it and after we have applied for the grants. So they have to buy it by the end of August.
But I understand, hang on, this is just loud, so I'll let you keep talking.
Yeah, if Peter Hoffman were willing to donate $1 million to Sudbury Valley Trustees for this purchase, we would only have to pay Sudbury Valley Trustees $25,000. No, sorry, $250,000. Yeah, it's early still.
so,
but yes.
Carolyn, what happens if the grant monies are not approved? What happens then?
We don't get any reimbursement money, but we still own the property. we're still gonna own the property regardless. It's just a
So-
matter of where the money comes, you know, how the money falls out in the end.
How much does that represent out of the 1.25 million when you deduct the CPA appropriation?
The CPA, we're getting $840,000 from CPA.
So nearly 400,000 is at risk if we don't get grants, if we don't get the grants from the state.
No, I don't think that's right, Peter. What's at risk is the $850,000 is at risk because that's what's coming from CPA that would not get reimbursed
Correct,
if we don't get the grant.
right.
Uh,
So,
Well,
and
that's-
all the reimbursement funds go back to CPA.
Right.
That's the way the CPA law is written, that any grant, reimbursement grant money that comes from a CPA funded project goes back to CPA.
So,
And what-
go ahead, Jeff.
And where's the other 400,000 coming from?
So, that's not the easiest to answer. So 260,000 of it is coming from the Conservation Commission Open Space Fund. Sudbury Valley Trustees has committed $50,000 in fundraising and possibly more. And then we're asking for on paper, because of Sudbury Valley Trustees' additional fundraising, we almost surely will not need the 1.25 million to pay to Sudbury Valley Trustees. So that leaves us about $50,000. Well, again, there's all kinds of math that happens, but basically, as it stands right now, it leaves us $100,000 short, of which we are asking for out of free cash
At the coming town meeting.
at the coming town meeting. Really, what we're asking for is the money to be appropriated, because the other grant that we're applying for requires all of the funding to be appropriated at this town meeting. But again, because of the additional fundraising that Sudbury Valley Trustees is doing, we can't count that as money that's appropriated for the grant. So we need the money on paper to be there. I don't know if that is confusing or if that
A
answers
bit
your
confusing, but I
question.
think in the end, we have to decide if we're sort of behind the project as it's generally sketched. Outlined.
We've already got 490,000 from CPA. You know, the biggest thing about the $100,000 at town meeting is if it doesn't get appropriated, we cannot apply for the land grant. Which we're applying for 2 grants. If we get the MVP grant, we have to pull that grant application anyway. But if we don't get the MVP grant, then we still have that as another possibility. If the $100,000 doesn't get approved at town meeting, we will still purchase the property. It may take us a little longer to gather the funding. We're gonna then pay interest to Sudbury Valley Trustees. Once they own the property, they will charge us interest until we buy it from them, but they're willing to give us up to a year. But it also, we cannot apply for the land grant. So we'll buy it without the possibility of a reimbursement grant.
Well, I'm sorry, Carolyn, why can't you buy without why is the land grant not available then?
If the $100,000 doesn't get approved at town meeting,
Why is that not?
because the full amount needs to be appropriated at town meeting.
You have to be able to pay for the entire thing.
Because
prior
it's
to
a
the
re,
grant
because
application.
it's a, exactly, because it's a reimbursement grant. They
Mhm,
can't reimburse us if we don't spend the money.
got it,
Or they won't.
got it.
Um,
Jason, Jeff, Paul?
No,
I still have great loudness, so I'm not going to talk yet.
Jeff, Jason, nothing?
I'll be right back. I can make it quiet for 5 minutes.
What did
I
Paul say?
don't. He's gonna
He's
try and
gonna-
make it quiet so he can talk. I mean, before we even vote, I don't really have any more questions about the project. I know I teased you guys when I joined the Economic Development Committee that, you know, I like our small town and I like keeping it small. And if conserving land continues that, then I'm in support of that.
Good. Jeff?
Do we actually know what the development was that they were thinking about before they, before it changed to conservation? Was it just more housing or was it,
oh, yeah.
yeah, so.
Yeah, it's, and we don't, so, we have an appraisal, we actually have 2 appraisals. And what they do, the way they appraise property for conservation is they kind of do a, because we've not been able to get onto the property to perk any of it, so, but everybody who's familiar with that area knows that a fair amount of it is either very wet or very rocky. So they do kind of a best case, worst case. The least amount of houses they estimate is 6. The most amount of houses they estimate is 28.
But there is no threat of development. That's just a fear of development that we have.
Well, if the town doesn't purchase it, they could, the property owners could, well, I guess at this point, we have committed to Sudbury Valley trustees that we will buy it from them. It's just a matter of, do we, for our purposes here today, I'm just asking for a letter supporting the project so that we can get reimbursement funds.
Okay.
You know, if you guys don't feel comfortable supporting the project and don't feel comfortable writing the letter, then that I understand that. I mean, I guess a little bit.
More
Sounds
like
the project is happening one way or another. It's whether or not we help make it cheaper for the town.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I can hear you guys, but I can't see you guys.
We see each other, I believe.
Yeah, why is this weird? This is weird. Can you see me moving? I've moved to location, but you guys are all
We can
frozen.
see you and hear you.
Okay. So I missed a bunch of that. But I heard Carolyn say that it's between 6 and 26 houses, so.
If it went under development.
If it went under
Correct.
development, it's easy that Carolyn, it's way more than 6. I would get, I know that property really, really well. I'd be amazed if a developer couldn't put easily 26 houses. I don't even buy that. I think it's more like 30 or 40 because it's 90+ acres. So.
But the bottom line is it's not going to be developed. It's the property is being purchased by the town. It's just a matter of if we're going to support.
Yeah, right. If we do that, I mean, I guess that's the one question I have for you, Carolyn. What if the town does not support it? And the town does not come up with the money otherwise right now, will Sudbury Valley still buy it? Or will they basically say, well, too bad, we're not in this game for 1.25 million?
That's a fair question. I guess we haven't had that conversation because, I mean, so.
Before you answer, I honestly, I'm complete, I don't know where you guys, everybody else is, but I'm totally for whatever we need to do to preserve this land. And we personally will making a donation to Sudbury Valley that will stipulate that that money needs to go to meet their 50 grand or whatever. But, I can still see this town basically saying, nah, we don't want to give the 100,000 from free cash. So we're not gonna, you got your 800 or whatever thousand, you're short by 400, too bad.
Isn't that crazy?
Yep. It is.
Right. So with the 840 from CPA and the 260 from the Conservation Open Space Fund, we're short, hold on. $150,000.
Yep, you're short 150, yep.
Yeah, so, we will, Sudbury Valley trustees will continue to fundraise. We will continue to fundraise, we'll do what we have to do. But it is going to cost the town more because we will then pay interest to Sudbury Valley trustees while we figure out where that other 150,000 is coming from. So, I
You're
think,
muted, Paul.
Yeah, unless Sudbury Valley comes up, I mean, if they get a magic donation of, $150,000, then
sure,
they made it back, as long as it's specific for that particular purpose. That's the only thing they could use it for. So they reduced the cost of the town's purchase price by 150,000.
exactly.
Paul, your checkbook's probably not far.
Wouldn't that be nice? If that checkbook was not far, you would buy this property.
Same, because that's the other thing, and especially like for you guys, this property is where people come to town to access the trails. This property is where the parking area is on Linden Street. The current owners have had it in recreation chapter land and have allowed public access. So most people think that we already own this property. It's already well used, it's well established in the trail system. So as far as during Mount Pisgah was the most heavily used recreation area in town to begin with. And then when COVID hit, the numbers like quadrupled. It's amazing. You go up there any Saturday or Sunday and ask people where they're from, and they are from all over the place. So they come to Berlin for this property.
They do. Well, this is a separate question, but have you thought about asking, Cabela's has that $10,000 that we know about every year for various nonprofits and such. And how about now that LL Bean is coming?
I'm very excited about that.
Have people thought about reaching out to them to help preserve open space and fill the gap a little bit? I mean, that's something people should be doing.
Right. Cabela's has given us money for other projects in town, mostly money for lumber to build bridges.
Cool.
So they have helped in the past. And, again, if we can't figure out how to fund this the way we're doing it, if we do need to find $150,000 somewhere, we would certainly ask Cabela's and LL Bean.
Right.
So nothing is off the table.
So I promised a 45-minute meeting at most and 30 if possible. Anything else, Jace, Jeff, Paul? So I'm going to make a motion to ask the EDC if they'd like to support the acquisition of the property known as Horseshoe Pond by the town of Berlin, and support a letter to the Commonwealth supporting the grant application request to fund this purchase. Gosh, I hope that was English.
I'll support your motion.
So you second it. That's good. So Jason seconds it. Let's discuss it some more or call it good. Any other thoughts or questions? And if we do this, if we support this, Carolyn and I will draft a letter. I don't know if we're allowed to circulate it. But if we're allowed to circulate, I'll circulate it for your further approval. If not, Carolyn, how would this be done? If you were doing this with the Conservation Commission, letter of support, how would you do it administratively?
I mean, I would write it and I would probably send it to the members just to make sure nobody had any additional input one way or another.
Okay, so we're
Um,
deliberating and deciding now. I'll forward the letter to you, and if you have any big reservations, you have your chance to say something then. If not, I'll sign
Yeah,
it.
or if,
and- and
if somebody
Carolyn,
wants to see something else in the letter or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can't deliberate too much about the letter over email. That would probably be prohibited.
Right.
If there's something really problematic, we'll have to call another meeting, but if not, I'm pretty confident we can get something together. So given that that is it, any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Well, let's take a vote. Paul,
I am for it.
Jason,
I'm for it.
Jeff,
I'm for it.
and I am for it as well. So there you go, Carolyn. You've got the
Excellent.
support of the Economic Development Committee.
Thank you, guys.
Jeff and Paul, thank you very much for allowing this meeting to be squeezed into your workday. And anything further? Otherwise, we'll see each other May 26th.
Hmm, May
Two
2nd.
questions, actually. Two questions for Carolyn. One, does this, when we started the meeting, you talked about letters from the community. You just needed 3 though, and this is one of them, or did you say many letters?
Correct. No,
Okay.
this is one.
For the grant application. Gotcha.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And sadly, I am not here for town meeting. I'm in California, and I don't think there's any way to vote. I can ask you guys, I don't think there's any way to vote an absentee for town meeting. I know you can.
Let me adjourn the meeting and we'll continue off.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I
Anybody,
second.
anybody is opposed? No. All for it? Yes. For
Aye.
me. And Jeff?
Yes.
Aye.
All right,
Yep.
all right. Let me stop the recording.